use our grant dollars towards more. We figured we would start out small, not knowing if people would use it, but we would figure out, we'd start with the minimum amount, see how it goes, and then assess it in the next fiscal year.
And it says per household, so when you go there, you show your license or whatever. They'll track that, so if I tried to go again, I wouldn't get another $50 off.
That's correct. So we did recognize that may be a challenge, but they do check IDs, and obviously, if people are going there, they're also going to help them understand there's a successful program already going on with the Board of Health for some items. So we have a great mercury program, and batteries, we take those for free. There's no charge for those. So we actually took those off of what they would charge. So we want to utilize, the resources that we have for the residents already. But yes, they will keep track of it, and they will actually give us a report monthly if needed. It's a minimum quarterly report, but we'll have a listing of all the people that are attending. Does that answer your question?
No, not at all. Selfishly, I have to deal with buyers doing walkthroughs and household hazardous waste being left behind on more times than I want to talk about, so it'll make my life easier.
Wonderful. We're really excited. We think this is a really good program to start in the community. We'll see how it's received, and then we can report back in a year.
Okay, excellent. No votes needed on this one?
No, good job, Darlene, thank you.
Wonderful.
You and your department, I know it's a lot of work, but it's going to be a great program.
Yeah,
Absolutely. So Eileen and Colleen are a big part of this, and we help people every day by looking for ways to do this. One more item you have in your packet. I just wanted to just let you know there's an event that's coming up at the end of August. It's actually Saturday, August 27th, and it's called ZAP. It's Zero Away Pollution. It's a 50th anniversary of the first major cleanup of the Blackstone River. And as Auburn being one of the Blackstone communities, and we've got this awesome resource right near us. This is a pretty big deal. All they're asking for people to do is basically clean up litter. Clean up litter around waterways, clean up litter in your neighborhood. Just clean up litter on that day and recognize that you're making a difference. The town of Auburn, so you can either go to the Blackstone. They have all sorts of events set up along the Riverway, or if anybody's interested in Auburn, we're hoping to do kind of our own little mini cleanup. We know that people have come out several times this year. We did a townwide cleanup day and the hazardous waste day. This is one more event. We just feel like it's, people are interested, and we have some volunteers that want to help out that day for a couple of hours in the morning. To please contact the Board of Health. We're happy to direct them. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
And I'll need a motion to move up item 6E. Second? All those in favor? Aye. Okay.
So through the chair, if I could ask Nick Schwartz, who is our DPW deputy, and or I should say assistant director, still in fire lingo with the deputy, our assistant DPW director and our sewer commissioner. Hi, Nick.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you for taking this out of order. So, Nick, we're on the item of the ARPA request for the Warren Road pump station. So we've, just by way of background, because we do have one new member, we have talked a little bit since ARPA funds were released. Thank you. Thank you. We've talked a little bit about the use of ARPA funds and how can we save the taxpayer dollars. And one clear way of saving taxpayer dollars with the use of ARPA funds is to put it toward items that would end up on the CIP, or we have to fund anyway. We do keep looking for grant funds for a lot of our sewer needs, but there are some sewer needs that are really priority. I wouldn't go as far as to say urgent, but if we don't address it quickly, we could have an urgent problem. So we're here before you today to explain the Warren Road pump station and what we're looking for. So do you want to speak to that? Do you want Ed to cover it?
Yep, happy to talk about it.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Julie.
Thanks.
Thank you for having me. So again, my name's Nick Schwartz. I'm the Sewer Superintendent, Assistant DPW Director. What we're requesting is ARPA funds to cover for the replacement of the Warren Road wastewater pumping station. It is an old-style ejector pumping station. It's the last of its kind that we have in the town. We've gone through the process of replacing the rest of this type of pump station. This is the last one we have. So this was, station was built in the 70s, 1975. It's reached the end of its useful life. Due to the age and condition of the equipment, high cost of replacement, and the difficulty of getting these obsolete parts for this old style of pneumatic ejector pump, we'd be looking to replace the station sometime in the near future. This is something that would be qualified under ARPA funding. So it's one of our highest priorities in the department to get done. Depending on the way that the project is designed and how the cost estimates come in, it may involve replacement of the 900 feet of force main as well, but we'll have to see how the design would come in.
All right. Any, Ed, did you want to add on to that, or?
No, I think, Nick, I think did a good job recapping that for you. Julie and I were just having a discussion about, what's available currently in the APA funds, and we're just kind of going through what's already been committed. So at about the 5.1, we estimate, and I apologize, I should have run a report to bring that balance in, but I think we committed about $600,000 so far through various votes that the board has taken. We did the impact shifts, we did the fire study, we did AYFS for a 3-year period. We did a sum of money initially for health-related COVID expenditures, about $75,000, I believe, and a few other miscellaneous votes that the board took. So the bulk of the ARPA funds is still available. There are several projects and ideas that have come to the board that are up for consideration, but we talked about this early on, knowing that this would be a good use of the ARPA funds.
Any questions from the board members?
Yeah, when this pumping station is down, what is the effect to the residents in that area?
When the pumping station's down,
Yeah,
so the procedure for if the pumping station were to actually go down would be we would have to bypass pump. We would have to get a company in who could run force main, 900 feet of force main up the road to the discharge point, or we would have to use our vac truck to draft out of the upstream manhole of the station and kind of run continuously until the station got back online. It does have 2 pneumatic ejector pumps, so if one pump goes down, the other pump can remain operational. The hope would be that, we could keep one in service at all times. But because of the age of this equipment, it's very difficult to get parts. There's long lead times, if they're even available at all. They don't even make these things anymore. And just being generally very inefficient. We could get significant energy savings from going to a newer style station as well.
yeah, thank you. I'm sorry, if you demoed the building, what is that was my real question.
Oh,
What is
like during the
impact?
construction?
Yes.
Oh, yes, of
Thank you,
course.
sorry about that.
So there's 2 ways that we could actually do the construction of this project. One would be to set up a temporary pumping system where they would basically run a pipe. They could either run a pipe or use the existing force main, pump out of the upstream manhole at the station, and just use the existing piping in the ground. So the contractor could set up a temporary bypass system. The other alternative would be to build the new station directly next to the existing station on the same parcel, and then demo the old station. We would evaluate that during the design, one versus the other. They're both feasible options. In this case, the hope would be to actually reuse this building. Typically, a pumping station requires a significant amount of excavation, digging down 20 or more feet. You get into a lot of extra costs with that, dewatering, rock. If we can use the existing building foundation and repurpose it as a submersible type station, we could save a lot of money that way. So if we were going to go that route, it would probably require a temporary bypass system, but it's very typical for this type of construction.
Okay, thank you.
did have one, or two, or three. So, you answered one of my questions, so the other is, what does $1 million buy us? And there's nothing that makes me more nervous than, we're going to assess it, and then, we've got $1 million item, and now we're talking about, okay, well, we're going and we're going to assess it. So what are we getting for $1 million?
Yes, so the cost estimate is a preliminary cost estimate based off of past projects and the uncertainty of sort of the market in the next year or so. So there's some contingencies on that, and this is sort of pre-design as well. But essentially what that would buy is the demolition of the existing pump station. It's a brick and block building, above-ground station. It currently houses an emergency standby generator, air compressors, compressed air tank, motor starters, controls, other equipment. All of that would be demolished and disposed. It currently has a 10-foot diameter concrete foundation that houses these ejector-style pots, I guess I'll just call them. What we would do is we would demolish all of that, we would retain the foundation. That would be converted into a wet well, so essentially this dry foundation that currently houses these pumps would be filled with wastewater and have submersible-style pumps. We would also likely need to design a new precast top on this to house hatches to access this underground station. There would be an above-ground electrical control panel that houses all of the new electrical components, so it would have a new electrical service, automatic transfer switch, control panels, and remote telemetry unit in order to communicate with our SCADA system. There would be a new above-ground, likely oil-fueled generator for the belly tank. This would also, the intention for this would be to replace the 900 feet of existing 6-inch ductile iron force main with new, most likely 4-inch PVC force main. That would be contingent on the cost estimates developed during design. It could be bid as an alternate. There's a potential that this station does not currently have 3-phase power run to it. There's a lot of significant advantages of having 3-phase power at a pump station like this, so we may need to run 3-phase power from Southbridge Street, which is 1,500 or so feet away. So it would potentially involve running that power there as well. Again, that would be fleshed out during design. But sort of broader view, it would be the demolish of this pump station and the replacement of it with a new submersible-style pump station, new controls, and a new force main.
So are we talking about a new exterior building?
So it would all be below ground. The only thing above ground would be an electrical enclosure, probably 8x8 stainless steel enclosure that houses all the electrical and control equipment, and there would be a generator above ground as well. Those would be the only things you'd see on the site.
Following up on Mrs. Ruffley's point, when you're demolishing this building, we're demolishing this equipment, what does that mean for the residents? Because you are in the middle of a residential neighborhood, so what does this mean as far as noise, all
Right,
this other
yeah.
stuff?
And we would control all that with the design specifications for the project. We would set standard 8 to 4 or 8 to 5 working hours, depending on how we typically do that. There's provisions in there to ensure that the contractors control noise and dust. Demolishing a building like this, it's a fairly quick process to actually take down the building. So we would need, during the design process, we would need to do a hazardous materials inventory, make sure there's no asbestos or PCB issues that we would have to encounter. So demolishing could involve hazardous materials remediation. It may not. But it would all be done during the day, during the week. This is on the corner. It is in a residential area. It's on the corner of the street. It's sort of tucked away a little bit from some of the other houses, but it is adjacent to them. So we would, of course, be mindful of the residents' traffic, making sure that emergency services are available, that it can get through, and make sure nobody's driveways are blocked, that kind of thing. They'd mostly be working on the site, so I don't believe there'd be too much work in the road unless we do actually replace the force main. But all of that would be accounted for.
And my last question is, the bypass, what does that involve?
Well, The most efficient way to do a bypass that I've seen done is they would basically put 2 submersible pumps in either the upstream the upstream manhole that goes into this station, or if it's determined that in order to do that, you have to allow the manhole to surcharge and then be drawn down. We would first need to analyze how much surcharge could potentially have an impact on the upstream residents, if any of that could cause some potential flooding or clogging issues. If it can be done that way, they can use that manhole. If not, they would need to add a temporary manhole with sort of a sump. They would install 2 pumps, one as a backup, as well as a float system with a backup as well, and an alarming system that allows the contractor to be called and respond if there's any issues with their temporary bypass system. Some systems involve running a pipe all the way up the road to the discharge point, but in a case like this, we could actually have them tie into the existing force main. So they would basically just run a pipe right underground, tie into the existing force main, then they would build their new station, and then tie that into the existing force main, and then that station would be, could be online. A second scenario that needs a bypass would be if we replace the force main itself. If we replace it in the same alignment as the existing force main, it could require an additional bypass. If we replace it right next to the existing pipe, then it would not. Or if we use a trenchless technology like pipe bursting or something like that, where we sleeve it within the existing pipe, you know, that it would sort of depend on how we do that pipe replacement. But in either way, it would be fairly unobtrusive to the residents, if that's
How
a
are they
concern.
going to be notified when work's going to begin, and how are they going to reach out to whoever they need to in the case of an emergency?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the beginning of the question.
How are the residents going to be notified, and how will they know who to contact should something happen that they're unsure of how to address?
Sure, yeah, I mean, there could be a public outreach component to it where we reach out to the neighbors of that street to let them know that the work is upcoming. We usually would reach out to the adjacent neighbors anyways. Anybody who would be tied in along the force main alignment, if we are replacing the force main, can be notified of that. They'd be directed to call the sewer department office and likely speak to myself. But yes, we would notify the residents prior to doing construction work in that area.
Are we talking door-to-door, or are we talking a letter in the mail?
We'd have to talk about how we were going to do that. We haven't quite fleshed that out to this point. But, you know, I'm certainly open to, if the board prefers a certain way, you know, I'm certainly open to.
My preference, once you get to a point where you're at a design phase and you're going to get ready, is to actually have a meeting
Yep.
up here with the residents so that they can ask their questions and understand what the process is going to be. That would be my preference, but I'm one of 5, so.
Yeah, of course. We've gone door to door in the past. We are currently working on a project on Rose Lane. It's actually partially in Auburn, partially in Worcester, where we've gone door to door with those residents as well. We are doing sewer system evaluation study right now, where we went door to door, and we've also used the reverse 911 system. We've used our Facebook notifications. We have notifications on the website. So, you know, we have a lot of different ways to reach out to everybody there. But, you know, the more outreach, the better, because the more people know about the project, you know, the more they know what to expect.
Yeah, I just think an in-person meeting is preferable to all of those things because, or in addition to them, because a lot of people aren't on those things. They may not know until the day of, and suddenly you're getting flooded with calls, or up here is getting flooded with calls, like, what's going on, we don't understand,
Yep.
you know, so. And especially when you're dealing with sewer, which is obviously, as you well know, certainly not something any of us want visiting us in our home.
Right.
It's a little more than your average, you know, town activity.
Yes, of course. And nobody would see any disruption in their sewer service. It would really just be the construction in the area that would have an effect on them.
Thank you.
Through the chair, if I can just, well, first of all, I want to thank Nick just for the great job he's doing on this. As you can tell, he knows his stuff, so to speak, and he's very good at this. Also want to thank he and Joanna also for the outreach that they recently did in a neighborhood where we're doing some testing of sewer, where there may be smoke. And I think we had let you know, we used a combination of a number of different things, including letters too. So we can certainly look at all mechanisms, you know, the more the better. Just to respond to Mr. Carpenter's question a little bit also, as far as we never know what it's going to cost. We don't know what it's going to cost until it's designed and we go out to bid. And that's a problem with any of these projects. We can't get a price until we have bid specs. We can't get bid specs until we have a design. So we have to have it designed, we have to have the bid docs written up, then we have to go out to bid under procurement laws for Mass General Law. There are a number of different procurement laws that may apply to this. It may not be a straight 30B, it may be a 139. There are a number of different chapters that we have to look at. So unfortunately, the hard part of making an estimate is, as Nick said, we're trying to look at stations that we've replaced in the past. What was the cost then? What would that cost be in today's dollars? Literally, as things are being developed and put out to bid, the prices are going up and up and up because of the supply chain. We met with someone the other day who was telling us, a developer who was telling us that he has to wait a year for some piping for some water issues. So that in that year, a lot of increases could happen to the prices. So this is our best estimate at the moment. We didn't want to come in asking for too much. We put in a little contingency, but quite honestly, similar to Camp Gleason, we could end up coming back after it goes out to bid to say, you know what, these are the prices, this is the market.
Playgrounds too, I remember last year.
The playgrounds went up 50% in less than a year. You know, at one point, we were quoted 50,000, and then it was 6 months later, we were quoted 75,000. And if we didn't get the order in by, I think it was the end of November, that was gonna go up another 25,000. So some things we just can't control, so I don't wanna tell the board that $1 million is definitely going to do it. We think it will, but we don't know until we get the actual numbers down and we actually go out to bid and hear from contractors as to what they're gonna charge us.
Just being optimistic, everything comes in well under. What happens to the funds?
Great,
available?
then they're still in the ARPA,
still
they're
in
still
the-
in the ARPA funding.
And then if they go over, you have to come back. What does it cost for engineering? You must have a breakdown.
Typically, so the engineering, I've included in this estimate, that's typically around 20%. Usually you'll see around 8% for design engineering and 12% for construction phase engineering, bidding phase services. And we can also, what I typically like to do is procure or get an engineer signed on for design phase services, go through bidding, and then see what we have for construction costs, and then kind of tailor the design phase, the construction phase engineering. You know, if we have enough money for them for full-time construction observation, for example, great. If not, you know, we can sort of figure it out at that point.
So would 300,000 get you to that point where you'd be able to come back and tell us what a hard cost would be, or
Sorry.
would 300,000 get you to that point where you could tell us what the actual cost is? I know right now you're estimating.
Right, through the chair, I'll just, we won't have an actual cost till it goes out to bid.
So how much will it cost to get you to that point?
So we'll have to do the engineering, and then they would do the bid docs. So you're saying 20% is what we're assuming, which is about $200,000?
Yeah, 20% would be design and construction phase engineering. So typically, design phase engineering could be 8%. I'd have to get proposals.
That's why I said 300,000, because that
Yeah.
gets you, 30%.
But we won't know what the total cost is until we receive those quotes back from contractors.
And then we could allocate the money at that point, or? Because again, like if you're gonna ask for, we have 5 million left, but if you're asking for 5 million at that point,
Well, part of the issue is you cannot enter into a contract with any vendor unless the money is in place to pay the full price of the contract. So we wouldn't be able to we could go out to bid for a project with a contingency that the funding would be approved after the bids come in, but once you might not get the same bid if it's a contingent bid. So generally, you have to have the money in place. You have to have the money in place before you can sign any contract.
so again, being optimistic, I'm hoping prices will come down in the future as, things hit that critical mass and they start backing down. So I think we might be in a more favorable position. But again, there's so many unknowns. Again, I'd rather the ARPA funds than the taxpayer, being hit on the budget. But just to say $1 million, and I'm not questioning that you did the effort, you guessing as best as you can. I'm just thinking, what do we get? Can we allocate funds to get to that point where we'll have an answer and we can certainly allocate more funds of that? So I don't know what that phase is, but just to.
Yeah, I would have to check with town council if we can put an RFP out for a project without having the funds allocated to pay for the project.
But I would also say, once your design drawings are done, your construction documents are done, you can get a better estimate cost, unless those have already been done, and that's what you have to estimate it off of.
No, you are correct. We could have a better estimate by the time the construction's, the design is done. So it sounds like you're proposing we would get some amount to get us through design and potentially bidding, and then come back for more once we have the bids. And again, I don't know how it works from a procurement standpoint, if that's an issue or not. But I would say that it would be very beneficial for the town from a cost standpoint to get this designed as quickly as possible and out to bid so that contractors are able to bid on this by this winter, because that's when the most favorable bidding climate is, when contractors are lining up their work for the next year, especially when they're able to get their lead time items in over the winter, and then they can start construction in the spring. So as long as it doesn't, slow that process down.
And through the chair, I think the important part is, however the board wants to move forward, obviously we will. I would have to just check with town council if we can put an RFP out or a bid out without having the funds in place, and let's assume we can. Then the flip side is, if you allocate up to $1 million in ARPA funds, and we use 800,000, then the other 200,000 is still there. So it hasn't been used. The only thing that can be used is what the board votes it to be used for. So even if there was excess, if the board voted $1 million for the project, and the project came in at 900, we couldn't spend that on anything else. It can only be spent on the project that the board would support.
And
I don't know if that
conversely, if
addresses them.
the project, you needed more money for it, you'd still have to come back to us. I don't know that we'd get to a point, knowing that this is urgent and required, that we would say no. I mean, barring this going up by, 100%. So I don't necessarily think that going back to town council and sitting on our hands longer versus let's get to spending this money. This has been a priority from day one. I don't think it's been clear amongst all town administration and this board that this has been a priority. So that's my position, is I think we should vote to move forward now.
I think what we heard, we don't have to go to bidding, and we'll have a better estimate. That would be, if we take it to design and then get some estimates there, I think that is better than 1 million. We might know 2 million at that point. I think that is kind of what we're here to do, is make the right decisions. We don't have all the information. I don't want to hold anything up, but at the same time, 1 million is a round number. I'm not questioning. As you put the numbers together, that could be how it came out, and you
Yeah, and
feel like, $1 million. Like, no, I'd like to see more. That's
And I was going to make a comment about that. It does look like a big round number, like, hey, let's just say $1 million. But it is based off of actual projects that have been done recently. We just did 4 of these in the past couple of years. Worcester is in the process of doing 3 right now that my former firm and myself designed and put out to bid. I'm familiar with how much these stations, done in this exact same way, cost. That being said, there's contingency in there for the way that the market's going right now. Lead time issues, things like that. So the number is, it's a conservative number, but it's realistic.
Any other?
Just one more, because, as every politician will tell you, nothing annoys us more when people characterize our words in ways that we don't intend it. And what Mr. Chambers was talking about is exactly what I'm talking about, is how do we get to a number that we can be more comfortable with? So it's not questioning anybody, it's simply asking a question, which is what we're here for. I am somewhat in sympathy with Mr. Chambers' idea of let's do the design and then see where we're at. So, obviously it's a matter of the board, but I appreciate, your explanations. And I also know that you wouldn't have been hired in the town of Auburn if you weren't qualified for the job that you had. So, I think I know after 8 years a few things. But anyways, with that, I'll yield the floor, as they used to say.
My only concern with waiting to get a better estimate, I kind of agree with Scott in that we should just move forward. My only concern with waiting to get a better estimate of what it's actually gonna be is then we have pushed it out to waiting till there's another selectmen meeting and there's, so that I would be in favor of doing the $1 million.
So I would say with, things take time, you're gonna have to do design, you have a schedule, there's gonna be delays there.
Guys, I got to cut you off. We got to go through the chair. I'm losing control of my meetings a little
All right.
bit. So please wait till you get acknowledged by the chair. So with that, do we have a vote? Do we have a motion?
I'd make a motion to approve 300,000 for design documents.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We'll go one by one. Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mrs. Ruffey?
No,
I just blanked on your name. Mr. Chambers?
Yes.
And I am a no.
So through the chair, just per the charter, you need 3 votes for anything to pass. So obviously, that didn't pass.
Here we are on a
Okay.
4-man board. Do we have another motion?
I would make a motion to go forward with the $1 million.
Okay. Do we have a second?
You need-
I can second.
you can-
I'll second. And Mr. Carpenter?
No.
Mrs. Ruffey?
Yes.
Mr. Chambers?
No.
And I'm a yes. So we are stuck.
So at this point, right,
Mr.
We
Chairman,
can't make any-
I would make a motion that we table it to the next meeting, ask the town manager to seek further guidance on the procurement, because if this is a stumbling block, then that would perhaps dislodge a vote. That would be my motion.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It is a vote.
So through the chair, I just, for my own purposes, want to clarify, let's assume that we find out that this project is going to be $800,000. I think,
I don't see
would the board, would the board support it? My same question is, what if we find out the project is $2 million? So my concern is to spend the money on design, not knowing if we're going forward with the project. So I don't know if that triggers any, I'm concerned about ARPA regs. I don't know. Maybe there's no problem, but can you spend money on design for a project that you may not actually fund?
That you may not go through with.
Right, and I don't know the answer to that.
Does ARP allow you to do exploratory funding?
And that, I don't know the answer. Right now, I think we're probably okay, but I raise it because we may see Tom Zadelis tomorrow morning, who may say, you can't design a project and not commit to spend it, because you just said you're using it to address a sewer infrastructure problem. So if we don't address the sewer infrastructure problem, did we need ARPA? The only thing that makes me think maybe we can do that is we did use it as a revenue, under the category of revenue loss, which gives you a little bit more flexibility under ARPA to use it for different things. We just haven't, this is new to us. We just don't know this yet. So I don't want to say that it's not going to be a problem. I just raise it as a potential problem. So that would be my
For
concern.
the chair, so then I would look to make a motion to approve 300,000 for the project, and you come back and tell us what the project would actually be at that point.
I think that's
I think
not what
that's-
Ms. Jacobson just said. I think she said she doesn't even know if we could use ARPA dollars to explore if we haven't said we're going forward with such a process.
It wasn't for exploring, it's for you to go ahead and start doing it, and then you come back and tell us what it actually is. So it's semantics with the words. It's not for just design, and you run out of money at design, and you come back. I think that helps with the
And
intent.
if I may just add, my biggest concern is getting the design started as soon as possible. So however the board decides to go forward with that, I think it would be beneficial for the town from a cost standpoint, regardless of which way we go, to get that started one way or the other.
Through the chair, can we reconsider that?
We can reconsider anything, absolutely. Ms. Jacobson, do you have any concerns about that? Do you want town council's input first?
I think I'm a little bit more concerned about just the use of the ARPA dollars. Maybe that can be resolved. I'm just going to think outside the box for a second, so forgive me for thinking out loud, but maybe it can be resolved. What if the board took a vote to support $300,000 in ARPA funding for the design, but approves of the project the board approves of the project, and phase one is approving 300,000 for design. Phase two will be to approve the remaining dollars. So we know we're designing it and we're building it. That's a little different than the vote that you took, just for the design. That would commit the board to spending the ARPA dollars to get the project done, whether it's less or whether it's more.
That's the required
Phase,
vote.
phase two, if that's what the board wants, we could come back. If the board wants to come back, I think that's what you want, is to come back with the dollar amount.
Through the chair, I think through the explanation, there are many different procedures that could take place, and I think each one of those will affect the total cost of the project, and they won't necessarily know, but they haven't even designed, so they don't know all the challenges. I think the expertise has shown some challenges, but I think through design, we probably know more, and I'm more comfortable allocating the money. I'm not saying that it doesn't need to go, but knowing that the design was done with, with the right process, allocating. I'm not saying I would vote one way or the other in the future, so I support the project, but I don't know if I would support it if it was a $5 million project, I think. So I wouldn't want to put a contingency that I approve the project, I approve of the idea of the project until we know more about that, so.
Under those circumstances, I'm not sure that the ARPA money would qualify for the design and engineering aspect if the project is not approved, so I would raise that concern as well.
And that's why I said if we allocated 300,000 for the project and you come back to us and tell us different, once you have a better design, then we're still approving of the project. This cost, from what I understand, is an estimate, but we don't have anything behind it, so who's to say that the project doesn't cost 300,000?
I think what administration's saying is that they don't know if ARPA would agree with semantics on, or once the money's spent, the money's spent. If it wasn't, if we didn't take steps to fully approve the project, they could say that first 300,000 has to be recaptured.
I think if the board did not support a cost that came in greater than $1 million, I'm just saying, then it would force a town meeting action to authorize a borrowing to cover the expense that the study is provided for. So if the board did not want to support it through ARPA, then it would have to be funded through the ratepayers through a bond issue that they would pay over a period of years. This project needs to be done one way or another.
Yeah,
It's not done through ARPA funds. I think the intent was to cover this through a long-term bond issue at some point in time. So this is not going to go away.
Money's got to get spent.
I would add that the intent is to value engineer this as well, to do this in as cost-effective a way as possible. And that's why I mentioned reusing existing foundations and repurposing them to avoid excavations. I don't expect we would run into quite the overruns that, I understand what your concern is, of course, but you know, the intent is to minimize the cost of this project.
Could you see a scenario, I'm not going to hold you to this, could you see a scenario where it costed $2+ million?
I am not going to try to predict the future, but I would be, I would not expect that, no.
Well, we can always split it in the middle. Just because we schedule one meeting in August doesn't mean we can't have another meeting in August, to give town administration time to talk to Mr. Zadelis, to talk to town council, and give us better answers. And that would be my recommendation, is, you know, this could be a one-item agenda, not, you know, a tree, and this would give them time to do what they need to do, and then we'd have our answers. And then either we're spending $1 million or we're spending something else, maybe. Who knows what we're going to be doing?
Or we're bonding it to the taxpayers, or we're spending ARPA funds.
Well, you know, I think you can reduce it any way you want to see it, but I think when you have a split board, I think it's time to compromise.
Find a resolution.
And my goal is to find a happy medium. I've been trying to find it for 8 years, haven't found it yet, but I've got another year, so maybe I'll find it. So my recommendation is, let's have a meeting in let's have our first meeting. Give town administration their time to research it, and we'll come back, and then we'll know what we can do and what we can't do.
You guys okay with that? I'll definitely call a special meeting in a second, we know.
Through the chair, I don't know how long it would take town council, so I will let you know as soon as we talk to him, and I don't know how long it will take Mr. Zadelis to research the ARPA regulations. So it may be August 22nd, that may be the earliest we can do this. I can't commit without knowing what either of their schedules are.
It's fair.
I don't know what their vacation schedules are or how long it's going to take to do this. But just to reiterate Ed's point and Nick's, we need to get this done. So if ARPA funds can help address that, then that's great. And if not, we have to get it done. So we will have to go to town meeting for another way to do it. So either way, it is going to get done. So the problem is if we go to, as far as using the ARPA funds for design and then not going through with construction, you're still relying on town meeting vote. That'll be like designing a school, and then even though you have a school design, you still need a town meeting vote to appropriate the dollars to do the project.
Construction process.
So it's a little more
And if I
complicated.
may, my recollection is that you have to show evidence that funding is in place in order to go out to bid.
So this
Now,
may
whether
be
that's
all-
changed or not, I don't know, but something's telling me that we've crossed this bridge before.
Okay. All right. Any more questions, concerns?
Yeah, through the chair, what is the ideal timeline for this? So if we go through design and then next spring are going through construction, is that the ideal timeline? My concern is if we go to town meeting, there's a chance that town meeting is not going to go for it either, and then where are we?
Yeah, so depending on the project, the ideal time to bid these is typically around January. That allows for a 1 to 2 month bidding period, and then maybe a month or so to review bids and get agreements together. Now you're into late winter to sign on a contractor, and they can start procuring equipment. With the long lead times of equipment that we're seeing now, we're seeing, for example, generators over a year. Pumps can be several months. I would expect that maybe around December would be a great time to put a project like this out to bid, December, January, maybe February at the latest. But I think, the earlier you can get it out there, early winter, the better the prices you're going to get. It can be bid any time of year, but you see better prices when they're put out to bid at that time of year. So going through a design period, it depends. A lot of design firms are very busy right now, so you're seeing a lot of schedules being pushed out. A project that may have taken 2 months to design might take 3. So if this is a project that would likely take 4 to 5 months to design, going through geotechnical investigation, survey, permitting with Concom, hazardous building material surveys. So yes, a 3 to 4 month design period would be aggressive. And if we're coming into August now, so just keeping that in mind as much as possible.
So ideally, as soon as possible.
Ideally, from a cost perspective. We're trying to reduce the cost of the project.
Through the chair, even to add to that, we're hearing on the municipal level across the state that it's becoming increasingly challenging to get any engineers right now because of all the federal dollars that are out there to all the communities. So there's ARPA dollars, there's the federal infrastructure bill, the ARPA dollars. There's another economic development bill that just passed the Senate on Friday that looks like, it's Thursday night, that looks like that will probably be signed into law by the governor. If that happens, you're talking billions of dollars of projects and the same amount of engineering firms. So it does, I'm a little concerned about that. We've had that concern running. We said, if all these projects go, who's going to do all the work? Where are these engineers going to come from? And that's whether you vote for this today or not, that is just an issue that we have to keep in mind. So when we're talking about timelines, you know, Nick's saying what would be an ideal, but that's assuming we actually get a firm who can take this project on.
We need to put it out to bid, and then we need to get a firm on board, so that process already takes potentially a month, you know, just before we even start. Just to put that in perspective.
I mean, we can get some of the answers from town council, but where town council won't be able to answer is whether the board should go forward in approval of the project or not. I mean, that's still going to be the question when we come back in August, is this a project that the board is going to support? Or does the board support it, but through the ratepayers, as opposed to ARPA? Or is it a combination? Is it a combination of ratepayers and ARPA?
All right. I don't think we're going to get any reconsideration for the full vote, and we can't move forward otherwise. Yep.
So Mr. Carpenter's out of the room. I don't want to necessarily talk about that without him here, but I could reconsider a different number if we felt it was still achievable. I've heard 800,000 thrown out there.
Oh, through the chair, I just randomly said that as an example. If it came in at 8, I don't have any idea. I'm believing it will come in around $1 million, because that's the estimates that you worked up. When I say 8, I said 8 for the reason that if it came in at 8, to answer your question, what happens to the other 2? Nothing, it's never utilized. It doesn't come out, it stays in. It only comes out as you expend, as you get invoices.
Can I ask
Yeah.
do you have an overall timeline that you were looking to achieve prior to this meeting, or? I know you,
For the construction of this project,
yeah, for the whole thing. So you just said about 3 months for design, and then, because, I mean, you're saying about 5 months, and, I mean, we're already pushing the limit. So you came in expecting the money December. You're still not fully ready to bid, right?
it depends on when we can procure, or when we can get an engineer on board. My, I guess, ideal timeline would be to have this designed and out to bid in the winter. Ready for construction in the spring, and built by likely the summer or fall of next year.
And then lead time plays a lot into that.
It does, yeah.
Certain things are taking a year, so if you
Right.
bid in December, it's not happening till December. You don't dig.
It
December.
depends on where lead times are at that time.
Through the chair, if I can just add something that just recently happened with a design firm. So we received $50,000 in state earmark in the FY22 budget, and that was for the library sprinkler system. So we received it in the state budget. It was approved, I'm going to say last August in the state budget. We didn't actually get our grant docs from the state until probably January or February. At that time, it then took us a bit to get an engineering firm on board. So now we were already 6 months behind what we expected. The engineering firm is also behind due to labor shortages, COVID, other issues that come up. So they were not able to finish the design in a 3 or 4 month period to even put it out to bid, which meant we had to go to the legislature a month ago and ask for legislative support. It's called a PAC, which means they're overriding the ability, as you know, with funding in a budget. Once June 30th comes, you can't carry that money into the next year. So without legislative approval, that $50,000 earmark couldn't be carried forward. So we found out it is tied in with the economic development bill. And if the economic development bill gets signed, and it did get passed through both houses, House and Senate, if that gets signed, then our PAC is approved, and then we can access the dollars. And the reason I say that is, number one, just to briefly tell you about the library engineering, but to also just point out that this engineering firm, we've worked with them often, they're great. We've never had any delays with them ever. And this year, we're experiencing significant delays. So I think your ideal timeline may not hold, depending on who we get. So I don't want to commit that this is the time we'll get it. This is our plan, this is what we're aiming for, but it all depends on the firm that we get. So is the board voting to
I do have a
direct
lot
town
more
administration?
questions and concerns. It sounds like no matter what, there's going to be delays, so it would be probably best to get recommendation from town council on how to proceed on that. Again, I don't know if I can approve what do we get. I know Mr. Carpenter asked, what do we get? I don't necessarily need to see the design drawings, but something more than a visual, I think, or contemplation. And we don't know what the market's gonna be in 2 years, you know, and I say that because if you're going out to bid, like, things might pick up, they might not. We don't know what the economy's gonna be, so it's our best guess. And as professionals, I'm sure you're using it and seeing what the market is, and, so I do believe that everything's kosher there. I just wanna make sure that we're being responsible with it. I'm not trying to hold things up, but I think until we have more information, it's probably best.
So through the chair, a couple things. If that's the way the board wants, if you just take a vote, then I can go to town council with the question. But also, just want to just clarify something from my way of thinking too. What if, and I think this is what made it rise on the priority list, what happens if the pump station goes down and, as you said, there are no more parts? So you do a temporary bypass, but if there are no more parts, the pump station goes down, we can't fix it.
We would have to find a way to fix it.
But through the chair, I believe he said temporary pumping of that, so at a cost, and I think that's the world we live in as things.
Right,
come.
so when it went down, I know you weren't here a couple of years ago, we had a pretty catastrophic incident where we had to have trucks come in, and that, I don't remember the cost of that, but it was an emergency, and we spent a lot of money with those trucks running 24/7.
Yeah,
Is that what we'd be facing?
No, so this is a much smaller pump station.
Okay.
I think you're referring to the force main that broke on Sword Street. So this is a much lower flow station than that. It would be able to be handled by maybe 1 or 2 trucks, and they may need to run 24/7 until the issue gets resolved.
Okay. All right, well, that's good to hear,
Still
because I
possible.
was still concerned, even if you had voted tonight, there's always that possibility that this is going to go down. So I'm just, in my mind, just trying to get a handle on it. Even if we're in the process of designing it and getting someone to build it, we still have a problem if it goes down. So we're just hoping it doesn't between now and the time we actually get a new one. Okay. And it's not as catastrophic as what we went through.
Wouldn't be as
It was
catastrophic,
that was a challenge that last time.
But it would be, it certainly would be a cost.
Okay, thanks.
Through the chair, where would the funds come from if it were to go down?
So I think we would have to call a emergency meeting of town meeting. And they would have to take some type of action to fund what's required to keep that station going.
Yeah, through the chair, when it was not the same, it was a similar situation on a larger scale. When that happened, as far as procurement goes, you just go ahead and you procure. So we were contacting companies to try to help us, because we didn't have the equipment to do it on our own. So we had to bring in companies in to do this. And there's something under the law called emergency procurement, so you don't have to go through the standard process of going out to bid because it's an emergency. You document it, you send it to the IG, the AG, everybody else that has to know, and that covers you. But then as far as getting the money, you still need the appropriation to fund it. Last time, I think we had it in sewer retained earnings, but which requires a vote
Yeah,
at
there
town
are
meeting.
certain things that qualify under an emergency provision that would allow you to deficit spend. I'm not so sure this would qualify, but that's a discussion we'd have to have with DOR. If it didn't qualify, then we've appropriated more money annually in sewer line repairs to deal with these catastrophic type events that are unforeseen, that provide some money, at least to do a fix or a Band-Aid approach. I don't know if we're at a point where a Band-Aid is gonna hold us, or is gonna carry us that long, given the uniqueness of the parts situation. They just don't manufacture them anymore, so I don't know.
Yeah, it would depend on the nature of the failure,
Event.
how that would go.
Anyway, thanks. I just wanted to ask that and be clear too, because even moving forward, there's no guarantee that that's not going to go down. We can just hope that we're getting ahead of it proactively before that happens.
All right, so the vote's been taken to table this with town manager seeking guidance of town council as to if we could piecemeal fund this project.
No, I don't think we actually took a vote. I know I made a motion, it was second.
Oh, we didn't, that's my apologies. Did we have a
more
second?
discussion, so that's good.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
No.
Aye.
So if we are able to get all these answers prior to August 22nd, within enough notice time, we'll let you know. Mr. Chair, would you mind taking the next item out of order, because it's also, Mr. Schwartz is here for the next one?
Do I have a motion to move up agenda item 6E?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those are votes.
So, Nick, can you explain this one? You put a lot of work into this as well.
Yes, thank you. So this is the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection Gap 3 Energy Grant for this year. So this is a grant that helps fund energy-saving initiatives, and one of the eligible entities for this grant is Wastewater Utilities. We learned about this grant opportunity maybe a month or two ago, and it aligned with one of our concerns that we're having as far as rising energy costs, that I'm sure we're all aware of. The sewer department has a very large energy budget to maintain all of our pumping stations, and that's going to see a sharp increase. So we're looking at potential energy-saving measures. Learning about this grant, it gave us a nice framework to sort of look at this. So we partnered with Guardian Energy, who's worked with the town on some other energy-saving projects in the past, and had them do a energy analysis at each of our 12 pumping stations to see if there were any opportunities for energy savings that would qualify under this grant opportunity. They did identify 3 pumping stations that would be potential candidates for VFD replacement projects. The way that these pumps are operated are with motor starters, and not to get too technical, I don't know how familiar everybody is with that, but essentially a motor starter either turns on the pump or turns it off. A VFD, or variable frequency drive, allows you to sort of turn a pump on gradually, turn it down gradually. It also allows you to run a pump at certain speeds as opposed to just on. So the Guardian Energy did calculations on how we currently run our pumping stations and how we might be able to run our pumping stations using these variable frequency drives. And they found that by ramping down the speed that the pumps are running at to, I believe it was about 80%, we saw a significant cost savings at 2 of our larger pumping stations. Well, actually 3 of them. One of them, we decided that the cost benefit wasn't quite good enough. So the 2 pumping stations that we targeted were the Holstrom Court and Sword Street pumping stations. They're 2 of our 3 largest pumping stations, the largest being the Pinrock pumping station, which already has variable frequency drives on it. By going to this motor control mechanism, that allows us to potentially save, have an annual cost savings of about $22,000, $22,620 is what they calculated a year. And with energy incentives, this grant program, the intent is to fill the gap where things are funded. So they require that the town has a minimum cost share of at least 10%, and there's a maximum grant for each applicant of $200,000. So by doing these 2 projects, the Holstrom Court pumping station and the Sword Street pumping station, we were able to maximize that grant opportunity of $200,000 while providing a 14% cost share from the town, from the sewer department. That also includes incentives from the energy provider of about just under $30,000 as well to help fund this project. So we're still working with this consultant to flesh out any other potential cost impacts, but that would be the cost impact to the sewer department. $32,000 in order to fund a $262,000 project to replace these variable frequency drives.
Any questions, concerns from the board? Yeah, Mr. Carpenter? Sorry, Mr. Chambers?
Oh, so I'm sorry, through the chair, can ARPA funds be used on that, the $32,000? Or does it have to come from the
Yes,
sewer
through the chair.
department?
ARPA funds, the way we've we've set it up with the revenue loss category, can be used for things that could come out of other sources. Would it meet, it would meet an ARPA requirement, even if it was under a separate category of sewer infrastructure.
Chair? Those savings projected, were those at the 11 cents a kilowatt or the 17 cents?
The higher, no, I believe they projected it at the higher energy cost.
Okay. Thank you. I'll be good now.
Okay, and do we have a motion?
Make a motion that we vote to accept and expend up to $200,000 from the Massachusetts DEP GAP 3 funding for clean energy projects to upgrade the Holstrom Court and Sword Street pump stations.
A second.
Okay, any further discussion? No? All those in favor?
Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. It is a vote. And I put one of those in my pool, and I've already been saving money.
There you go. They work.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
We'll let you know about the status of that.
Yes.
Thank
you very
for
much.
taking those out of order. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you. All right, moving back to agenda item, we are not going to be able to speak on agenda item 5A, is my understanding. Not be able to take action?
I think you can.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I misread the email.
Oh, no, yes. So, do you want me to give the background of
Please.
this? Okay. So, Mr. Will Liberty, as you know, made a public announcement that he was resigning from the board. He made that back in June. He submitted an email that's in your packet on Saturday, July 2nd, to the town clerk, notifying her that he was resigning. He also attached a letter that was signed by his typed signature, so not a wet signature, as they'll call it, to the town clerk, and it was in that email. The issue is that the town clerk is acting on the belief that you have to have, a letter of resignation has to be a wet signature. So we went back to Mass General Law that dictates resignation of elected officials. And I think it also applies to appointed, but it doesn't matter. For this case, it's elected, and it does apply to that. And the law just states that a notice of resignation must be provided to the town clerk. It doesn't state the form of that notice. It just says notice must be required. So the town clerk at this point has not accepted the resignation of Mr. Will Liberty, and has commented that the board therefore can't go forward to vote for a special election to replace him until we have that wet signature. In the meantime, the chair and Ed and I were trying to figure this out before tonight's meeting, because we needed to know if you're going to be considering a special election. You have until September 5th to notify the town clerk if you want a special town election on the November ballot. So, because it's 64 days before the November ballot. Town council gave his opinion that the law does not require a wet signature. The town clerk said that the election division has told her that you need a wet signature. So she did reach out to them, because I said, we need something in writing to try to resolve this. So she reached out to them, and they wrote back and said, it is their opinion that you need a wet signature. Generally was the word. However, they said, it's up to your town council, we don't give legal advice. And town council said, you don't need a wet signature. And the law is pretty clear that you don't need a wet signature. So the town clerk's concern was, well, what if someone sued and said that you had a special election and it wasn't valid? Town council, in the conference call that we had with him last week, felt that the law was very clear.
Town council provided some case law as well, which
Did.
was very much in support of the wet signatures not necessarily being.
Correct. So there were two different routes to go. If you just take a plain reading of the law, a wet signature is not required. He did provide notice to the town clerk under the law. If someone were to challenge that, he would go back. He wanted to look at case law. He looked at the Amherst case. And under the Amherst case, a notice was given to a different authority than it should have been given to, but the fact that this person notified another authority, and the other authority accepted the notification, that made it a valid resignation. So town council's advice was for this board to take a vote to accept Mr. Liberty's resignation as he stated here at a meeting and as he wrote to the town clerk. If this board accepts that resignation under the Amherst case, the resignation has been accepted. It doesn't matter if it was the town clerk or this board, it's been accepted. And he felt comfortable that no matter which way you looked at this, that that was sufficient. Now, all that being said, the chair has, we've tried to reach out to Mr. Liberty. He's
That's-
obviously at boot camp, which makes it a
That's
little more
correct. And
challenging.
I did look at the laws myself, and I completely agree with everything Ms. Jacobson stated. I further overnighted Mr. Liberty a letter asking to just seeing how he's doing, giving him support, and then also letting him know of this matter. And then I pre-printed a standard form resignation along with a return envelope, all FedEx. So hoping that he, I don't know how often he can, maybe Mr. Chambers might know how often he gets his mail.
For 6 weeks.
That was my concern.
And that was our concern. So the problem is if the town clerk was just, and I understand it, you know, she was under the impression that it had to be a wet signature. That has been cleared up. We're good to go with this. She wasn't sure why we had to vote tonight, and I explained a couple things. Number one, Mr. Liberty is at boot camp for 12 weeks, so you may not hear back from him for 12 weeks. And she had also sent a letter to him and hadn't received any response. And you had given us his address at boot camp, and we sent it there as well. The other issue is, at the August meeting, I know Mrs. Ruffley would be on vacation at your August meeting. So there's a slight chance, if someone were to get sick, and in this pandemic, you don't know, you might not have a quorum to meet in August to even vote. Or you might not get, even if you had all 4, which you're not, you're only going to have 3. Even if all 3 were here, you may not have agreement on it. And then you don't have a meeting until after September 5th. And with Labor Day, there was no way to figure out a meeting in there. So that's why we wanted to get it on the agenda for tonight, for the board to at least consider and possibly vote to have a special election and notify her by September 5th. My feeling is, if you get the letter from Mr. Liberty before then, it's a moot point. You've got it, it's been accepted, and you've already taken the vote.
And further, we could vote at the next meeting to reaffirm our previous vote now that the wet signature we're in, if we wanted to get procedural with it. But I do feel, based on the body of research that's been collected, I think we have full authority to call for a special election. So with that, I believe also our, I guess, symbolic action of accepting his resignation further just bolsters our position.
Right, that was town council's opinion, that the board should take a vote to accept his resignation based on the letter that he submitted, I guess, to the chair was also on it, as well as from his verbal communication to you, and clearly he is not here anymore. And then he thought that that would withstand any appeal from anyone who might say you didn't have the authority, because there's case law to say that you do. And under the law, then you trigger the next law, and under the next law, the board is the one that schedules a special town meeting.
Do we have any questions, concerns? Yeah, Mr. Carpenter?
We don't, under the normal course of things, accept resignations. And with the town clerk going to the state authorities and talking to the Elections Commission, I'm not going to Bigfoot the town clerk. She is the appropriate person to accept this resignation, not this board. And I'm sure there's been any number of cases where things have happened. But myself, we don't do that. We've never done it. So I'm not, and again, out of respect for the town clerk and the work that she does, I am not going to vote to accept a resignation that is properly within the province of her office and not this one.
Any further questions, concerns from the board members?
Through the chair, is there anything precluding us to take this vote?
There is not. This is my meeting, and we can absolutely take this vote.
Okay.
And through the chair, just to be clear, the attorneys from the state that Ms. Greenwell did contact said that they would not provide a legal opinion, that we had to rely on town council. And then I sent them what town council had written, and that's what we have to go by.
Okay.
So
Chambers?
we normally don't accept resignations, but town council's recommending we do because of the nature brought forth by the clerk.
It's due to the clerk's interpretation of the statute, due to some guidance she received from the Elections Commission. However, none of these bodies want to give prospective legal opinions. They don't, by their very function, that they don't give prospective legal opinions. So they're kind of telling us, make a decision. We're doing this to say, look, we think that Tristan sat up here in my seat and resigned, wrote a letter, and now we have some disagreement as to the validity of this resignation. No, we all know, in substance, Tristan has resigned. Nobody's refuting that point. So this symbolic action, if you want to call it that, just further bolsters the position that, yes, we can call a special election.
And I was gonna say, and the reason for this is so we can call a special election.
Yes. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept Tristan LaLiberty's resignation from the Board of Selectmen per his email resignation to the town clerk.
Can I amend that to say based on town council feedback?
And ask her to do that.
Based
I
on
wanted
town
to-
council's feedback.
I wanted to ask the chair.
Do we have a second?
I will second that.
Okay. And Mr. Carpenter?
No.
Mr. Ruffey?
Yes.
Mr. Chambers?
Yes.
And the chair is a yes. It is a vote. Okay.
So through the chair, given that, per our phone call and discussion with town council, he felt that whether you took that or not, it was
Yes.
within the law anyway. Now you have double
Yes.
insurance that it was, so he said you could now vote on a special town meeting.
All right. So then we move to the vote to call a special election on November 8th to fill the vacancy created by Mr. LaLiberty's resignation. Yes.
Do we know the cost of a special election?
Through the chair, yeah, it's about $10,000 was the estimate of the town clerk. The reason for that is if you hold it on the state elections, you have to have, it can't be on a state ballot, it has to be on a separate, it has to be a separate special election, it can be on the same day. You may need extra poll workers, but most importantly, you need another whole set of ballots, and you have to have as many ballots at that election as the state sends out. So you're talking a lot of ballots. So that was her best estimate on the cost.
Kind of a statement, but this election would put someone in office in November,
That's correct.
and typically it would be in May.
That's correct.
And do we know what,
Wait, that point was Mr. LaLiberty's.
Under the law, when there's a vacancy on an elected position,
It does go to the next.
it goes to the next election. So
and so with that, so from November to May, do we know what kind of activity we expect? I mean, obviously, we do commit licensing and some other stuff, but is there anything pressing where we need a
There's
fifth member?
There's the annual tax split vote, there's
Would
emergency
they-
matters that come before
Would
us.
they be here before that?
No.
maybe within a week, you
Yeah.
know, we usually take tax classification in November.
It's normally mid-November.
So they might only have a week.
No.
We had one more. Yeah, so I think I asked it and then I started talking because that's what I do. Besides that, there's tax classification. Would do town manager review, when is that, April?
We have the application of ARPA funds coming up. I mean, it's tough to say. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say it's going to be a mundane next year, you know, things will come up. And a functioning board is required, and forgive me, but we're not functioning that much tonight with these split votes, so.
I think that functions.
And through the board, as far as the, through the chair, as far as the town manager evaluation, you probably won't have that this year, because I'm here until the end of January, and then you probably wouldn't have it. You know, I won't be here, so it wouldn't be on me, and Ed would only have been here 2 months, so it wouldn't be on him either.
So it could benefit us to work together a little bit better. I don't know. Not that we don't work together. I don't know the history. I think Dan's more of a historian on subjects, but I would imagine the board has gone through changes with 4 members, and I just don't see the,
Well, I'll be clear, I want a 5-person board.
It's a good thing there are 4 of us then. Mr. Chairman, there's no need to jump this 6 months. It's an expense that we don't need. It's, as someone who's overseen elections, it's problematic from a different ballot situation. There's a lot of logistics that go into holding an election. And you're going to be holding this in November, which is going to be an avalanche of people voting because you're voting for a new governor, you're voting for a new congressman, potentially, and everybody else. It's just not. It is not the situation that we were in 2 years ago when Mr. Salukas didn't take his seat. We could not function as a 3-person board. We can function as a 4-person board. And I don't really see the benefit of electing somebody in November because I think we all sitting up here would say it's a learning curve. I'm still learning 8 years in. So to sit there and say to somebody, let's get you elected in November, and a week later, one of the most consequential votes you're ever going to take is going to happen. You're not going to be able to get that person up to speed. You're not going to be able to get a person who's going to be making a vote. You're setting them up to fail. And you know, again, we have an election in May. There'll be 3 seats. 2 of them will be for 3-year terms. 1 will be for a unexpired term. You know, it just, to me, we are a functioning board. The fact that we don't necessarily all agree is why we're all get elected, because we all have different points of view, and our diversity is what brings us, which brings this board its strength. It isn't
Well,
the
I
fact
think-
that we all agree
I think
is
the
going to
vo-
bring its strength. I think the diversity brings its strength in the
I think our
discussion.
town charter allows for 5. I think our town residents deserve 5. And, you know, agree to disagree on the point that, you know, if we just sit here and stay stagnant because there's 2 votes that naysay the expenditures of money or movement in the town, then you are getting your way. So I understand the vote you're taking, but it's absolutely opposed to the way I feel about the way I want this town run.
And that's a fair point, Mr. Chairman. I don't do it for my advantage. I think if you look at my voting record over 27 years, I think you've come to a different conclusion when I bring up points. You know, again, to my earlier point, there's nothing worse than characterizing what somebody's trying to say. I said what I said. That's my position. You have a different position. I respect it, but I don't agree with it. And I don't think we're stagnant. I don't think that we're going to fail. I think if you look at the history of the board, even when we had a 5-member board, most votes were unanimous. They were not 4-1, 3-2. There were a couple, I can tell you, I remember them, but not very often. And I don't anticipate in the year ahead we're going to have a lot of 2-2 or 3-1 or anything else. I think you need to be a little more, you know, we all need to be a little more optimistic and look at each other and realize that we're all here for the same purpose, which is to actually move Auburn forward. And I think we've done that, and my predecessors have done it, and I'm sure my successors will do it. So I'm very confident in the 4-member board, but it's not up to me whether we do it or not, other than my vote.
Okay. Any
Through
further
the
comments?
Chair, I would also like to see a 5-member board. Not only is this November election, it's going to be, like, voter turnout is going to be great, and why not have another member on the board that was elected by a majority when you have good voter turnout?
You absolutely would. Do we, I think we know the vote. Are we going to, does anybody want to bring a motion forward?
I'll bring a motion that we do not vote to accept a special election.
Second,
Mr. Carpenter?
yes.
Mrs. Rupley?
No.
Mr. Chambers?
Yes.
And the chair is a no.
So through the chair, if we get a signed resignation from Mr. Liberty, I'll still let you all know. I'm sorry, I'm just looking up Mass General Law. I just wanted to have the right reference, and I can't find it that fast. My apologies. But if we do get it, I'll let you know. But it sounds like the board's taken a position anyway, so it wouldn't matter.
Okay. So with not calling it not passing, should we bring a motion to pass it? Let that fail, and then take it off, or we can just take it off?
Well, I think maybe, I just want to clarify the vote. So the vote you just took was to not have us call a special election.
Yep.
So,
Which was a 50-50 split.
right. So if there's a motion for reconsideration, you could do a motion for reconsideration and see if the vote would change. But if it doesn't change, then the motion not to call failed because you didn't get 3 to approve. You didn't get 3 to approve
Correct.
the motion to call. I know, it's complicated.
Said that backwards.
Essentially, no action.
No action.
No action.
Correct.
So we can't take action unless there's a majority.
Yep.
So we've stated our position at this time.
So we'll just move on from it.
Correct. If, like I said, the only change in that could be if another member who voted, I think under Robert's rules, if the member who voted against it changed their mind, they could call for reconsideration. Again, I'm not an expert on Robert's rules, but that could happen at any time, yeah.
All right, moving on to request the chief of police to assign police details to the polling site for September 2022 primary election and November 2022 general election. This is required by statute.
Correct, through the chair. This is on there, you did it before, and now the new election laws have required that you do this, but you did it before. So technically, it's odd, but the wording in the law requires that the Board of Selectmen assign details. The Board of Selectmen under the town charter doesn't have the authority to assign details. The police chief does. So the only way that we could think to legally comply is to have you, the board, ask the police chief to assign details to the election, which is now a requirement, as you said, under the statute, versus it used to be on an individual municipality basis, but we've always done that, and the board's always done that.
Through the chair, it might be semantics, but can we request the police chief, or do we have to request you to request the police chief?
That's a good point. I mean, technically, you could ask the town manager to ask the police chief.
I
It's the
just
police
wanna-
chief, yeah, you're right. But I think it's fine by just saying that you're requesting the police chief. I think you'd be fine. Because, put it this way, I'm recommending it too. So, just another new law that we have to comply with. The town clerk does have a lot right now with all these new laws coming out,
Oh, absolutely.
and this is certainly one of them.
I would make a motion that we request the police chief to assign details to the polling sites, or site, as it were, on September 2022 primary and the general election in November.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It is a vote.
Thank you.
And moving on to appoint new member to serve on the Flag Redesign Committee.
So through the chair, that is on there under Board of Selectmen because when Mr. Will Liberty, I want to say he resigned, you did accept his resignation, so technically I can say that. When Mr. Liberty resigned, he therefore is no longer on the Flag Committee. So he was representing the Flag Committee as a member of the board. So this board created that committee. This board could tweak the creation. You could have a member of yourselves serve on it, or you could see if we would be able to get another resident. I do know it was very difficult. At one point, we only had one resident who was interested, which is a committee of 2. Now there's 2, but there's not a third. You could, they would need to have 3 to function. So it's up to you. But the recommendation is that you probably appoint someone so the whole effort doesn't just fail because there's not enough members.
We know the status of that committee. I know they did voting and everything. Are they ready to present?
That I do not know.
They did select, they selected a design, or a couple of designs that they liked, and I think they wanted to go to the public and get more feedback on the few. They narrowed it down from, say, 30 or whatever amount of entries they had to a smaller amount. and they want to then bring that back to the residents to see what ones of the ones that they chose to be finalists are. So they're not done. That's the bottom line. They're not done. I did talk to Tristan before he left and asked him if he thought it was necessary to get somebody else, or was the work of the committee done? And he said the work isn't done. They did a lot, but they're not done yet. They're not ready to make a recommendation.
Do we have any members willing to serve? So with that, does somebody want to make a motion that we seek to have a third member from the public?
So moved.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It is a vote.
Okay, we will post the vacant seat, and can I throw something out there just in case? Let's say we get one application. Would the board consider amending their vote to say that if we get someone to apply for it, one person, that board would allow us to appoint that one person? Or do you want that one person to come in for an interview, even if you have no other candidates? I'm just trying to streamline it for the person. If there's two applicants, then yes, you have to make a decision between two. It's your appointment, you'd have to bring them in. If we get one candidate,
I'll make a motion, we suspend the rule of the board that we need to have an interview if we have a single candidate. Because there's a rule that we have to have them come in.
thank you. I think that would expedite it.
Through the chair, what is the timeline on that application? Because if you get one, and then a week later you get another, like.
Well, we would put a deadline on it.
Okay.
So I would probably put a deadline on it before your next meeting to give them enough opportunity. It's still a month away, so we'll probably put a deadline on it of, let's say, August 16th. And that way,
We can hold.
you can get it on the agenda, and if there were two people, we could bring them in on the 22nd, if they're available.
Well, I mean, I'm happy to make, and I will make that motion that we suspend the rule. Should there be a sole candidate, waive the rule that we interview the candidate.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
I don't see any gift acceptances, no proclamations and recognitions. Moving on to agenda item 5G, that's vote on the appointment of election workers for the year 2022, 2023. You have a list of those workers in your packets.
Chairman, I make a motion that we adopt them as submitted by the town clerk.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it is a vote. And vote on Board of Registrars appointment. And again,
I would make a motion that we appoint Sue Weigel to
Aye.
the vacancy.
I second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I had a couple discussions, but,
My apologies.
no, that's fine.
You haven't said aye yet.
Correct, I have not.
I'm sorry, do you have a question?
So I didn't know the candidates, and I didn't know what the representation was from precincts, and if that mix was still in aligned. I have no objection to what you guys did. I just.
So it's 2 and 2. I do know Mr. D a little from serving on the committee, and I do know Ms. Bukowski. She used to be the director of the Auburn Housing Authority. She's a town meeting member. She's held many different offices. So the composition is it's usually 2 and 2. So 2 Republicans, which is now Mrs. Nurse, who's been on for a long time, and Jerry, and I forget his last name, but I believe begins with a J. And it's recommended from the town committees. So the Democratic Town Committee, this is a seat for them. So Mike McNamara would have been Democratic committee member. So it's just replacing that.
Okay, and I'm just wondering, like, in the Democratic side, is more than one precinct covered with that?
Well, the town clerk is the other Democrat on the committee, so she is automatically a member of the committee. So when I was on the board, Ellen was a member of the Republican Party, so we had her and Deb Nurse were represented the Republican committee, and then the Democratic committee was me and Mike.
Okay, thank you. Aye.
Thank you. All right, moving on to agenda item 5I, drain layers license for Dogowitz Construction LLC of Webster, Mass.
Motion to approve provided all applicable requirements of the state and town and its departments, boards, and commissions have been fulfilled, said license subject to all conditions stated upon it, failure to comply with any and all conditions shall invalidate the license and render it null and void.
Second.
In discussion? One quick question. They don't need to, if it's a reapplication, I know they didn't need to.
They don't need to come.
Doesn't need to do it?
They don't need to come before you. They just need to have the sewer commission sign off.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it is a vote. Moving on to 5J, drain layers license, James J. Bork Services of Spencer, previously licensed as PB Contracting.
Motion to approve based on our standard language.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It is a vote. Okay. And on to town manager items, 6B.
Through the chair, this is an opportunity, we always use EMPG grant funds to fund Code Red. The state has put out a NOFO for, notice of funding availability, for excess grant funds for communities that didn't use their EMPG allocations, for other communities to go after those dollars on a competitive basis. They're specified to target shelter facilities and generators in shelter facilities. The timing of this is good because our primary shelter is at the high school, and the high school is in need of 2 switches, and apparently those switches are no longer manufactured, so, it's in need of repair. Some of what they need is no longer manufactured, so they have to get a different type of switch and rewire it. The cost of that is we just got a quote, it's about $33,000. The grant will pay up to $50,000, so I'm asking for a vote to apply for up to 50, but the recent quote that we just got was about 33 and change. So it's a great opportunity to get them replaced. They have to be replaced.
Mr. Chairman, just a quick question. Any match for us, or is this just an out-and-out grant?
The match is normally in place, but they waived it, so there's no match. Yeah, it's a great opportunity. No match required on
And
this.
this covers all the expense to replace?
Yes, yes. Joe Fahey's been great from the school department. He solicited a quote, and then when some time went on, we weren't sure what the deadline was for this, so he went back out and got an adjusted quote. So we submitted an up-to-date grant application for the quote that we received. Once again, until we actually go out, we hope that that's the price. That's why I'm asking for up to 50, because there's an opportunity to go back to the state for more money, because the cost came in higher. But I think that one's pretty good. The quote came in about a week ago.
Chairman, I'll make a motion that we vote to accept and expend what's outlined in our lovely agenda.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
And any discussion on the matter? Seeing none, do we have a vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Yes, it is a vote. Okay. And vote to accept and expend fiscal year 2019-2020, Department of Homeland Security, Federal Emergency Management Agency, EMPG Citizens Corps Program Grant Funds.
Great. So, again, this is additional EMPG monies that have been allocated to CCPs, which are community CERT, and working with our Assistant Emergency Management Director and CERT member, Joe Chanette, we came up with a budget and an application, so I put it in your packet, because there were a lot of different things on here, but it's mostly just equipment for CERT, and we're allowed to apply up to $5,000. It's competitive, and we're applying for $4,980. We couldn't find another item for $20 to give back $20. So, asking your approval to accept and expend the funds.
Make a motion to vote and expend based on the description in our agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion on the matter? No? And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, it is a vote.
Thank you.
And on to tabled items. We have discussion on bylaw amendment for the purposes of encouraging biodegradable packaging.
I don't know what that means, Mr. Chairman.
That was Mr. LaLiberty's item. I know it didn't have necessarily, if memory serves me correctly, it didn't have a majority vote at the time and seemed preliminary. So my question to the board would be, do you want a motion to remove this item from the agenda?
Well, can I ask, who are we encouraging to do this for? I'm not necessarily opposed to it or in favor of it, I'm just trying to figure out who we're encouraging.
I don't have that answer.
My understanding it was for restaurants.
Ah,
Or
It
like,
was for businesses, but
Yeah.
restaurants were the primary discussion item. But it was everything more or less biodegradable packaging.
there was the ask, forgive me, for a bylaw on, to,
That's correct.
I would just say that at this time, I would support removing it from the agenda. Certainly, at the time, I think it's not that it's not important, I just don't think it's, we had a lot in the pipeline that we voted on before our departures, our two recent departures, so I think we've got a lot to do.
I would agree. I'm just concerned about who's going to do the legwork. I know that Tristan felt strongly about this, but if none of us are going to pick up that, then
I'm not in favor of continuing the discussion. I think I made that known.
you did.
We've only got 12 weeks of boot camp. We can get him to put some work in, don't you worry. I don't think we'll have difficulty getting him to send us a draft.
So do we have a second on Mr. Carpenter's motion?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It is a vote. Okay, and on to 7B, discussion on fossil fuel investments. Same thing brought by Mr. Liberty. That was in regard to a bylaw or policy. It was really open-ended as to the town not investing in any fossil fuel investments. And again, Mr. Chambers made his position.
I believe we were trying to get clarification from town council on who had the authority before we did anything.
Through the chair, so the question was whether the board could direct the treasurer on how to invest money under the charter and under the law. So, Ed,
So I did have a conversation with town council. I have not received an opinion yet. We had a general discussion. He was going to check into the statutory authority of the treasurer to see if a policy of the board would conflict with that statute. And we held off at least having a discussion with our investment firm until such opinion came in. So I don't know if that's something you want us to continue to pursue. Do you want to keep it on the table, or I'll follow the sentiment of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I just have a question. Do we actually know what percentage of our portfolio is in fossil fuels? Also understanding that a lot of these companies also are doing work in wind, solar, and other areas. So while they might be pumping crude, as is legal, they're also doing other things. So I don't know that we necessarily want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but my question is really,
So
what percentage do we have?
Yeah, based
if you
upon
know?
the information I received from our investment consultant, the only investment that's part of the portfolio is tied to fossil fuel is our OPEB investment, which is about $5 to $6 million, and roughly 2 to 3% of that is tied to fossil fuel investments. So we're not talking a lot of money.
Correct. I would make a motion that we remove this as a tabled item at this time.
I'll second.
Any discussion on the matter? I personally feel that it's a fiduciary responsibility when you come to investing to get the most yield. So while supporting clean air and energy, I didn't think that this was the best mechanism to do it. So I have no objections to that whatsoever. Any further discussion? Okay, with that, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It is a vote.
so we'll let Bob know. Through the chair, we will also let town council know at this point, whatever he's done, obviously, we'll still pay for, but not to pursue it any further. Okay.
And we have discussion on potential creation of a student member of the Board of Selectmen. That's brought forward by Mr. Carpenter. So, Mr. Carpenter.
Yes, so there's only one town that I'm aware of that does this, and it's Charlton. And actually, I'd worked with Mr. Liberty on this a while back, and somehow it kind of fell off. The goal would be, well, one of my goals has always been to increase voter turnout. When I was on the Board of Registrars, I put together packets and did some voter registration, which was kind of interesting. I think that this is a great way to get some younger people involved. You know, my thought would be, you know, incoming juniors, they have an election, hopefully we could get the school department to agree to hold the election on the same day. And incoming juniors would be eligible, they would then take their seats, serve throughout, you know, that year, you know, the election. If they wanted to do that, obviously, we know their vote wouldn't be included in a quorum, but I think it's important to get their point of view, especially these last two items. I think would be very interesting to see what they think. But so it's something that we've been kicking around for a while, so I thought, well, if not now, when? So.
Are there any laws to people being out after a certain time? If a meeting run late, do they need to return? Do we have, I don't know what the restrictions are at that. I assume they're 17, 18, but.
I don't believe they would need to get a work permit to serve on the board, but that is a valid question that we can ask, but.
Okay, yeah, as long as it complies.
And you don't believe, they wouldn't be a binding vote, they'd still be a
No,
participating
it's
member? though?
really to get the next generation involved in decision-making and, you know, having worked at the registry and, you know, we registered people to vote all the time, and kids would come in, this is before they accepted 16 pre-registration, and they'd always say, well, I'll be 18 by the next election, not recognizing that there's a town election every year. And because, you know, so it's just a way to bring some attention. I know they do a lot of good work at the school department with, you know, the Constitution and other things, so, and I actually talked to a student who said if she wasn't graduating, she would really like to do this, so I thought that was positive, so. Obviously, we would need to work it out with the school committee and the school department as to what the phrase is, but I wanted to get the board's opinion if they thought it was worth moving forward with.
Ms. Ruffey, you had a question?
Yeah, so would adding a student member to the board require amendment to the charter? I have a few questions, actually. I don't know. So would it require an amendment to the charter to add a student member to the board? How would you choose would we choose the student? How would you determine what students were eligible for it? Are we only going Auburn High School? Are we looking at Bay Path? Are we looking at people at private schools? Are we going by age? We all receive a stipend, so would we be paying them as well? Would they require a work permit to pay them? Those are most of them. That's all.
Okay.
I'm good. Sorry. I realize nobody has the answers to those questions. They were just as I was
Mr. Cobbin,
reading
do you
it,
have all those?
thought.
I do, but if I don't, I will ask.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I don't think you need an amendment to the charter because you're not adding a voting member.
Okay.
You're simply bringing someone. The school committee currently has a student representative. I was thinking Auburn Public Schools, just because logistically speaking, you look at Bay Path, that's quite a few towns, how do you segregate it?
Yep. I meant like,
My feeling is it's
Obviously
open
a
to
resident.
anybody who is an incoming junior, and it would be by election. I understand that the current person on the school committee is chosen in a different way. I would think if we could get buy-in on this at the school committee and the school department level, having it on the same day, I might make some excitement. I know the town clerk has worked with some of the students in the We the People class and had them work, you know, the polls, so I think there's just an outcropping of that. Would they need a stipend? I will ask, but I don't believe so. Ed's got the money though, so don't worry.
Through the
He
chair.
doesn't know where it is, but he's got it in the safe.
And Mr. Chambers?
Yep, I don't think it can be just an election. I think you have to have people that are qualified and good standing with the school or, you know, so there has to be something to that. And all elections are popularity contests, so I just would want to make sure that they're vetted or meet certain requirements before being allowed to get on that ballot. But I am all in favor of more engagement, and as long as the right process is in place, it should be encouraged.
And just because I'm bringing the idea, this is a board, if the board votes to support this, it's a board project, it's not Dan's project. That's why I'm saying I want input because, which is not, I'm not saying that I'm not going to make the calls and whatnot, I'm saying it doesn't, meaningless if I'm the only one interested in doing it, because I'm not going to be here forever, and other boards may decide, well, what are we doing this for? You know, so as much as you want buy-in from the students, I want buy-in from the board before even taking that first initial step to say, hey, can we even do this? You know, there may be no interest in the student body to come up here. You don't know. I mean, you don't know until you try it. I hazard a guess based on that student, she was very excited about it. She had participated in other group boys and girls state, so she was already engaged in kind of looking at government. So but I think we have a very robust We the People program down there, so this is where it starts. Going to town meeting, there's nothing more democratic than sitting in town meeting and hearing people discuss, you know, how the town's going to move forward, how it's going to spend money. So it's
When would the election, let me back it up, are you elected freshman year's class president for the entire 4 years, or is it annual?
Oh, just the 1 year.
Annual.
Yeah.
So you could hold the vote theoretically at the same time.
So I think sophomores so sophomores that are going to be incoming juniors would be running, and then juniors incoming seniors, and then that person who's, you know, starting off as a sophomore has an opportunity to run for another term if they so choose.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a long process, you know, because again, it's putting additional responsibilities on people who aren't, you know, necessarily in need of extra responsibility, but.
Through the chair, I think we need to just take a look at the charter on this, just to be clear, because the charter does state, and I'd have to have it in front of me, but the charter does state that the Board of Selectmen shall be comprised of 5 members. I don't think it says 5 voting members. I think it says 5 members.
Okay.
Whether they vote or not, it's 5.
Yep.
Then there's another section of the charter that says no board or commission, other than the Board of Trustees of the library, shall have members that are, all boards and committees, other than the Board of Trustees of the library, cannot have an even number of members. They must have an uneven number of members. So there's 2 sections of the charter that I just would want to take a look at, and I'm not suggesting we go to town council, at least let us take a look. And then if it's something the board really does want to pursue, then we can go to town council and get some of the answers to those questions. But to Mr. Cover's point, if the board isn't interested in doing it, then we wouldn't go to council. But I just don't know
This person would not be a
if
voting
that's
member.
allowed. Right. But it's still, if it's considered a member versus, you have a 5-member select board under the charter.
The shall concerns me more on agenda item 5B than anything, but.
I just don't know. I mean, maybe that's true. I want to be able to give the board the appropriate advice, and I don't have the answer, but I do know there's 2 sections of the charter that concern me. And Ed, you were mentioning the possibility too of you have a member that's not voting. I mean, put it this way, with the planning board and the ZBA, we needed legislation to allow us to put an alternate member that was not voting, but was there, who needed to be voted. So I don't know if it rises to that, because this person would never vote, but there are some nuances in the law that I'm just not familiar with adding another member, even if they're not voting. I just don't know. Can you?
I think we're following the member. First of all, if they were going to get any of those privileges, they'd have to be on our town ballot, which would make them ineligible due to their age. But I have absolutely every intention of giving you the time to look at it, and if something bubbles up to the surface, because I'm sure we have similar language for the school committee, that it shall be X number of members, and they're able to do it. So, however, who knows if there's some some little line somewhere out there that, you know, buried in the books that allows that.
Select board representative.
Exactly. The town of Charlton does it, and it is not in their charter, so.
So maybe through the chair, it's finding, maybe it's not a member of the Board of Selectmen.
Correct.
Maybe it's a liaison to the Board of Selectmen.
Student liaison to the board.
A student, yeah.
Student rep.
I just think if you use the word member, you maybe run into some issues.
Would you be, or would you want one of us to go to the school committee with this once we'll probably keep it on for another meeting or so, formulate it more, and then I think we probably need their input on the matter.
Absolutely. I think we need buy-in from them and the school administration, because again, if they're going to try and put on an election the same day as we're doing an election, that's taking resources that might not be available. So, you know, got to dream first before you crash down to earth. reality.
All right, and anything further on that matter? No? All right, moving on to the minutes of 6/27/22. Does anybody have any amendments? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it is a vote.